Today on Mr. Media, we've got the audio from St. Petersburg Times media critic Eric Deggans' interview with ABC News legend and co-host of The View, Barbara Walters. Stick around.
Hello?
Hello, Barbara.
Yes.
Hi, this is Eric Deggans from the St. Petersburg Times.
How are you?
I'm doing just fine.
Good. How's St. Petersburg?
What's that?
I said, how is St. Petersburg?
It's
nice
raining.
big city.
It's raining, unfortunately.
You know what? It looks as if it's about to rain here.
Well,
Yeah.
give it 5 minutes. It'll stop.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate you making time to talk, and I
Thank
just
you.
have to let you know that I'm recording it. So I can
Okay.
turn it
No problem.
off. Now, I'm wondering, how do you sort of feel about reaction to your book so far? I mean...
Well, I'm amazed. I mean, the fact that it's number one in the whole country. The book has been out 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know a lot about publishing, but I'm amazed and I'm thrilled. And I've met a lot of, excuse me, could you take that in the other room possibly? It's hard to talk. Everybody's been so receptive, and everybody, I don't get out that much where I can be meeting with people and talking with people, and they've just been wonderful. So, I mean, people say, aren't you tired, and isn't your hand tired, and hasn't it been a drag? It hasn't. I've loved it. I called into The View today. They were taping a program that's going to be on Monday, and I told them that wherever I went, people talk to me about The View, and I don't get to see people that much, so I've loved it. Long answer, but it's been a very happy experience.
Well, we journalists, we love long answers to that.
Yeah, so you can cut them down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, one reason why I wanted to talk to you is because, I've taught classes about media for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and I always ask people to name the most influential journalist on TV now. And they always say Edward R. Murrow or Cronkite, and I always say you.
Thank you.
And I say you because you pioneered this style of mixing the personal, political, hard news, celebrity journalism in a form that we see all over television now.
Yes.
What do you
And my specials, by the way, the specials that I did that started in 1976 and are still going on, I mean, they professionally saved my career. But I'll tell you what's interesting. When we first started, when I came to ABC, where I was such a failure doing as the first female co-anchor of a network news program, and I was paired with Harry Reasoner, who just didn't want a partner, and that I was a total failure. But part of that contract had been to do 4 specials a year. So I was going to combine, the way news magazines did, a political person and a celebrity. So the first one had Barbara Streisand and her then boyfriend John Peters, and President-elect and Mrs. Jimmy Carter.
Wow.
And it was a huge success. And the second one had the Shah and Empress of Iran. I went to Iran to do it. I can't even remember who the movie star was, but there was somebody. And I thought that was a fascinating interview because that's when the Shah said that he didn't think a woman could rule. Anyway, as we kept doing these, we saw that the ratings went up for the celebrity and down for the political person. So more and more, these interviews became celebrity specials. They didn't start out that way. And they were the forerunner, with the exception of, I don't know when 60 Minutes began, pretty far back. They were the forerunner of the news magazine shows. But the programs that have always done this and still do are the morning shows, which would you'd be interviewing the Secretary of State from 7 to 7:30 and a celebrity chef or a movie star from 8 to 8:30. So they've always had that format. The thing that was interesting is that our specials somehow or other worked over the years, and they were the only ones that did. Other people tried them, including Oprah, and they never worked.
Is that where you learned the idea to try and mix the serious with the celebrity?
On the Today Show, I'm not sure that I said this is the way it has to be. I just thought that it was, to get to do the first interview with the President-elect, Jimmy Carter, then I thought was a great coup. And I thought that it was a good mix. I still do think it's a good mix, but people seem to want the celebrities more, certainly today. I have a whole chapter in the book on heads of state because I think I interviewed not every, but most of the important heads of state. We're not interested in that today. And most of the news magazines don't do it. And they don't know who the heads of state are or care. So that's changed, a lot.
I seem to remember that during that Carter interview, you asked about the double bed question, right?
Yeah, well, that was not what done me in, as Eliza Doolittle would say, because what had happened was that Gerald Ford had talked about, and Betty Ford, whom I had interviewed before, had talked about bringing their double bed to the White House. So I said, well, what would you be bringing to the White House? And Jimmy Carter went into sort of a long thing about, we're not going to do twin beds, we're going to bring a double bed. That was okay. But it was at the end of it when I said, looking at him solemnly, and said, be wise to us, Governor, be good to us, that I got just creamed. I mean, just destroyed by reviewers and my colleagues. And I sort of said later that if Walter Cronkite had said it in his mellifluous voice, he might have gotten away with it. But I was having a very hard time in general. That's when I was still doing the news. But the amazing thing is that the special got the huge rating. So the audience loved it. And then we kept doing them for a year. I mean, and that's a lot. They really, when I look back on, I was, the $1 million baby, and they said I was getting $1 million for doing the news. I wasn't. I was getting the same as Harry Reasoner, which was $500,000. So that Harry got a raise, and I got the same amount. And the other was for doing 4 one-hour sponsored primetime specials, so it was a bargain. But they saved me.
Wow.
And then it was after that things changed, and I went off and did probably the most important interviews that I think of my career, Sadat and Begin and Fidel Castro and Torrijos and Panama and so on.
Now, what made you add that little line?
Who can remember? It was 31 years ago.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. It maybe it seemed better to me than just saying thanks and good night. Yeah.
Now, you've also been credited for taking those interviews that you did with those amazing heads of state and humanizing them by asking them questions that were personal.
Well, but it's interesting because when I did the first live interview with Richard Nixon, the first interview he did after he left office, he was paid for. That was the interview with David Frost. And then after that, I did the first live interview that he did. And I started off by asking him foreign policy questions, and he was very knowledgeable. And then I was trying to humanize him, so because I thought I'll give him a chance to maybe, get some empathy. So I asked how he had gotten through the whole experience, and he said to me, "Get serious, Barbara." And I said, well, I am serious, President Nixon. No, he said, really get serious. Get back to the foreign policy question. Now, today, I mean, there isn't a personal question that hasn't been asked.
Exactly.
But I did, to some degree, I tried to humanize. For the most part, when I go back over those interviews, they were pretty substantial news interviews. But, I mean, there are times when I've had to be a little more courageous or a little more personal. I remember asking Vladimir Putin if he ever killed anybody. But I had to wait until I could sense how the interview was. Would he walk out? But I didn't usually do, I didn't ask about family and children. So today, the kind of personal questions that are asked, I just think, how far we've come. We have debates in which we have to wait until the issues are, until they're a half hour into the debate. And I did a lot of the early debates, and there were maybe 2 or 3, and that was it. I mean, 2 or 3 in the whole primary. So a lot has happened.
So it sounds as if you look at some of the things that maybe you started the little spark of and think maybe they've gotten out of control now.
No, I don't think they've gotten out of control. I think times have changed. I think I was very fortunate because I worked very hard at getting the interviews with the heads of state, and I guess it was considered that I was fair and relatively non-judgmental. I mean, I think of all the time I spent in the Middle East and doing interviews with people like Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin and Sadat and Begin and Moshe Dayan and Muammar Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. Those are, I think, very important interviews. and I'm very proud of them. And I think that it made for a venue that we don't have today. And I was also doing the celebrity interviews, and what it showed was that you could do both. That if the viewer respected you, you could do both.
Right. Well, you know, I saw one critic who called you the mistress of the impertinent question.
Well, that's a compliment, I guess. If you were a man, they wouldn't have called it impertinent. With a woman, you can say she's impertinent, and with a man, I don't know when this was, but with a man, you would say he was courageous. Yeah,
But you have figured out ways to ask those questions. You talked about the Putin one.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's thinking it, but how do you ask somebody that? I mean,
well, I think you have to take a deep breath, and I think you have to sort of judge what the atmosphere was. I mean, with Putin, I could see that we were getting along. I'm just trying to remember the interview. He was being pleasant. It was an interview that he wanted to do, and I waited until almost the end of the interview because there's always this feeling that they may walk out. I remember with Gaddafi, I said something like, you know that there are people who think that you're mad. I don't say, I think you're mad. I say, you know, there are some people who think that you're mad. And he laughed and more or less answered it. So I sometimes I say, you know, that there are people who think, or you know that there are rumors. With Yeltsin, I said, you know about the rumors. I'm sure you've read them, sir, that you drink too much. I mean, there are ways of couching. Sometimes I ask, or often I ask, what's the biggest misconception about you? And they'll bring the matter up.
Right. Now, another quote I saw describing you said that you were a deftly calculating woman with an impeccable sense of timing. What do you think about that description?
Well, I like the complimentary description is better than the negative one, so I can live with that.
Does it feel like that? I mean, people sort of look back now and they see how you progressed from the Today Show to ABC to the primetime specials to 2020, and they sense a plan. Was there a plan?
You know, one of the reasons that I wrote this book was because I said that young journalists, especially females, come up and say, oh, I wish we had your life, thinking that it's just been all one climb up. And it hasn't been. There have been successes, but there have been failures as well, personally and professionally. And so I've said to them, you have to have the whole package. So the idea that I had a plot in my mind that I was just going to have this great and glorious career is absurd. Nobody has that kind of I started that kind of plan. I got on the Today Show by accident. I was hired for 13 weeks. I was a writer on the show. I stayed on for 13 years. I went to ABC and was a failure. So, you know, you don't plan these things. You just, in my case, I worked as hard as I could. I had to work. I was supporting my family, so I couldn't say, I'm unhappy, I don't like this, I think I'll go home to Mama. And there are a lot of things that play a role that I hope that people can relate to. This is a book that's good for journalists, and it also has the history of the times while I was doing what I was doing, but I didn't want to write a book that was, and then I interviewed, and you know, I think that's a bore.
Right. Well, I mean, it's interesting because, you know, there is the very personal part of your story, but there's also the part that's very much journalism history.
Absolutely.
It's there for so much.
Absolutely, and it's a very big part of the story. And that's why, you know, today, when I see how many women are in the industry, that makes me very happy. Because it was a long climb. There was a time when I was on the Today Show. I mean, it sounds like ancient history. When there was a man named Frank McGee, and he wouldn't let me ask one of the Washington interviews until he'd asked 3. He didn't want me to ask any, as it turns out, and then they compromised that he could ask 3, and if I were lucky, I could ask 4. So, you know, there was a lot of, I wasn't waving a flag. I wasn't trying to create history. I was trying to do my job.
Right. Well, you know, I've interviewed, and now I'm blanking on his name, the former executive producer of 60 Minutes.
Don Hewitt.
Don Hewitt, thank you.
Yeah.
And one of his favorite lines is that when news started to make money, that's when it went downhill. And I think about your primetime specials, and it seems like your specials were a big part of that, convincing the network people that you could do these specials in prime time and make money. And I wonder if you have the same feeling.
Well, it's very different. Don Peterson has said to me that we lived in the golden age of news, and perhaps we did. And it will never be the same again now, because you've got all these cable stations, and you've got blogs, and you've got the internet, and you've got digital, and we have to keep up with the whole new experience that we're still learning. In terms of my specials, they've always been successful, and other people have tried them, and they haven't been. So for us, for ABC, they've still been big moneymakers. I mean, we've been doing the Academy Award specials, I can't even remember how many years.
Right.
We do 10 Most Fascinating People, but I mean, we've probably been doing them, I don't want to give a figure because I'd have to look it up, more than 20 years. And, I think people now come to expect quality and interesting people. And there are fewer and fewer of them because there are so many more entertainment shows, Access Hollywood, Extra, where there's movie star after movie star plugging their movie or their television show. I try to do more than that and to really let you have some idea of what this person is like. So I think the specials now have their own reputation, I hope.
Is that the difference? Is that why you've succeeded where other people haven't?
I don't know. I can't review everybody. I just am happy that we have, and that people know that they're quality, and people, kind of know what to expect.
And when I look at the TV landscape and I see the Today Show, Dateline NBC, and I see some of the stuff on daytime television, it feels to me like I'm seeing all these shows that kind of flowed from the things you started doing.
Well, that's lovely to hear. Well, the news magazines, perhaps, because we did start doing, although people didn't think of it that way, we did start doing the political and the celebrities. So in that sense, although I won't claim to say that I'm the forerunner of every news magazine. On 2020, I didn't do celebrities. I did the celebrities and the specials, and for the most part, on 2020, I did the more serious, the presidents, the heads of state. But I left 2020 4 years ago because it was becoming, although I love the program and I love the producer and I still occasionally do pieces for it, it was becoming almost all celebrities. And I wasn't enjoying that anymore. And that's why I left when I had 2 more years of my contract to go, and have been doing specials ever since. And not just celebrity specials. I mean, we did a special on cutting-edge longevity this year called How to Live to Be 150. We did a very important special on transgender children. We're repeating it this summer. We did a 2-hour special that they ran 2 years in a row called Heaven, Where Is It, How Do You Get There, with religious leaders, including the Dalai Lama. So it hasn't just been celebrities, but the news magazines, for the most part, are doing murders, celebrities out of rehab. It's a different time. Part of that is this whole emphasis on the networks, on the audience that's 18 to 49. 60 Minutes does very well, but they have a very old, considered to have a very old audience, where the average age is, 50 or 60.
It's in the 60s, yeah.
Yeah. So although they will be in the top 10, ABC would consider that, or NBC probably unimportant, because they want the 18 to 49 audience.
Well, it's interesting, broadcasting and cable lists the ad rates for all the shows, and even though 60 Minutes gives a much better rating.
Yes, isn't that interesting? Yeah.
So,
well, I'm glad I don't have to sell the show. I don't have to worry about sponsors. We always seem to have them. And then, of course, we have The View, which has become, we're going into our 12th year. I mean, it's become a force of its own.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think so, too. I thought it would last 2 years.
Now, when you started, how did you get the idea for The View?
Well, I didn't. I mean, what happened was that I was doing the specials and the 11 o'clock time period had been a very difficult time period, and show after show came on and died because 9 o'clock, you're still home, and by 10 o'clock you've done your chores in the house, and by 11 o'clock, the woman would leave. She'd pick up the kids from nursery school, or she'd go out to do her shopping, and it was a bad time period. So the network came to Bill Getty, who has been producing my specials for, 18 years or something, and said, do you have an idea for a show? And I sort of been noodling this around, and I said, I have an idea for a show, different women, different generations. And I had been watching David Brinkley, and I thought the best time on his Sunday show was when the whole cast got together and talked and did it without a script and did what we would call today hot topics. So I said, I have this idea for a show, different women of different generations, and that's almost what we said to start the show. And what has been interesting, and I don't know how you can calculate it, it's like asking me why the specials are successful, has been the chemistry of the different women involved, because other shows have tried to do it. Dick Clark tried to do it with men.
Right.
The Today Show tried to do it, I think, in the morning with 4 different women. And we've just been very fortunate, even with our ups and downs, where the chemistry has worked. And now the show is more popular than ever, and it's 5 women when I'm on, or 4 otherwise, somewhat different ages, different political points of view, different personal points of view, and it works. It's become one of the most popular programs, and that's not under news. That's under ABC Daytime Entertainment.
Yeah. Well, what I've always found interesting about both your career and The View is that just when you think there's a setback that could threaten the enterprise, it turns out to be an advantage.
I know, isn't that amazing? I know, and I think, well, how did that happen? Whoopee, as we say, and we have her now.
Well, I look at that and sort of say, is that Barbara Walters' specialty, coming back from adversity?
I don't know. I don't hold grudges. I think that Bill Getty and I have a very good idea of what this program should be. And we have been fortunate sometimes you have to be lucky, but we've also held firm to what we think the program should be, that it should be hot topics, that it should be guests, and I guess there are things that could torpedo us, and we've managed. The first 9 years were very peaceful. We had 2 rocky years, but even the rocky years created so much publicity, and I had hoped that Rosie would stay on. That was Rosie's decision with the network. And then, this year has just been wonderful. Wherever I go here when I've traveled, people come up to me, so many of them. We love The View. We watch The View. Everybody seems to love Whoopi. We've got 4 women of very different personalities and decisions. But I watch it myself now when I can, and I find myself arguing back. And I think that's what people at home do. I'm saying, no, that's not true, and you're talking too much. And I think, hey, I'm the audience.
Well, now, when you had Rosie on the show, did it feel like you had a tiger by the tail? Where
it felt like a roller coaster. Yeah. But I'm a great fan of Rosie's. Rosie has, by her own admission, emotional issues, as she says. And I think Rosie came on saying to me that she wanted to ride the bus and not be she wanted to be a passenger and not the driver. And then when she came on, she wanted to be the driver. So, there were some problems with that. But Rosie is a very big talent. And, look, we're okay. We fortunately have Whoopi.
Okay. Now, one of the things that you talked about when you talked about the specials was that you just didn't get any movie star. And I think people have looked at you and said, here's a woman who's willing to talk to interview subjects, even when other people might find them unsavory or you might want to stay away from them. I'm thinking of the Mark David Chapman interview.
The murderers.
Yeah. So what's your sense about what makes a good guest, and why are you willing to go to these subjects?
Well, because I think, I don't do every criminal.
Right.
These were epic-making interviews, the Menendez brothers, or Mark David Chapman, or I'm trying to think of some of that. Gene Harris. I wouldn't do O.J. The only time O.J. has wanted to do interviews is for money. I turned down the book. If I did it, they wanted me to do that interview, I wouldn't. But when I've done the murderers, it's because they have, for the most part, been not just criminals, but controversial, but important. And when I'm doing them, I try, not that I don't have judgments and feelings, but while I'm doing them, I try not to be judgmental. There are programs like 48 Hours. I think that's all they do is crime stories. Fortunately, I could also mix it up with heads of state and the big stars like Tom Hanks or Tom Cruise. So I think that I have had, such enormous fortune in being able to interview all these different kinds of people. And I write about them in separate chapters in the book, including Monica Lewinsky and how we got the interview, which is still the most watched news special in history.
Right.
So, along with my own personal story, I know you've seen the book. There's a separate chapter on presidents and on heads of state and on murderers and on Monica and on celebrities who affected my life and celebrities I could interview again and others I don't want to interview again. So that's all. That's all there, and maybe that's journalistic history. But
yeah. Well, whenever I've talked to other people about getting big celebrity interviews, Connie Chung and people like that, they always mention you as sort of the gold standard in terms of you're so persistent. And you're
I have been, but I feel, if I've made a difference for women, not just in this field, but maybe in others, then for me at this point in my life, that's an enormous reward, and that makes me feel very good. And when I travel around now, because I've been on this book tour, and I see, young women coming up, or not even so young, and saying, you made a difference, and this is why I'm in this business or that business. It gives me huge pleasure. So these are very good times for me.
So
I think, unfortunately, I'm being bugged to go.
Oh, okay. One more quick question.
Sure.
You obviously learned a lot about yourself personally going through this book and recounting your history. What did you learn about yourself professionally?
That I worked very hard.
Well, you knew that already, though, right?
No. I knew that I worked very hard. I sometimes in going through it, because I had to go through so many of my old interviews, I thought, did I do that? Did I do that? And then, as I said to Oprah at one point, when I said it to her, I struck a chord in her. And I said, I wish I'd enjoyed it more. Because sometimes, and I say this not just women and men, we work so hard, we forget to enjoy it. We forget to take time to enjoy the view, as we say every day. So I have a feeling of accomplishment. I also know that it was very hard work, and I'm blessed. What an unbelievable life I've had. But it all didn't come that easy, and it wasn't for most of us.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.